Hi everyone, welcome to our Kwento Tayo, which is featuring four amazing Filipino and Filipino Americans, especially with us here today. I'm so excited because three of them I know from Epic, and one person I just met through the world of Instagram, which is amazing. The Filipino community is really huge. And without further said ado, can I have our first pair introduce each other?
Well, I had the pleasure of getting to know Kate, who is on your screen right there. She's 24. She currently lives in Austin and she works in the service industry. And I described her as leche flan because she's a very sweet person. Everyone loves a good leche flan, you know.
True.
So,
It's so
and I
good.
found out it's one of her favorite desserts. So it all just makes sense.
Yes.
And me, I had the pleasure of meeting Gabriel. I found out that he's a jack of all trades. Currently studying as a psychology major and also part of the Epic. And I described him as a sizzling sisig, which is a good, Filipino food. It has all the spices and the all the flavor and everything on it, which has all the wow and the pizzazz on.
And I
Yes,
also had it for dinner tonight.
yes, he had it for
I
dinner.
had
What
a
are the
great time talking to Louie, using he, him pronouns. And we were also from Epic, so we met from Epic as well. If I had a Filipino food to describe him, I said lumpia because when I was talking to him, he seemed like really fun and great at parties. And lumpia is great at parties. Like you see it at every Filipino party. So that's Louis. That's Louis for you. And he mentioned he's 5'4". So I'm saying like kind of small in stature height. But yeah.
Thank you for that beautiful description, Ari. And my partner was Ari. And she uses her pronouns, and I would describe her as kare kare. It's like adobo, kind of like adobo, which is a staple Filipino dish, but not really, kind of different. Kind of given that like not like other girls type of vibes.
Right. Thank you everyone for sharing. And with that said, I will be starting with the first question, which is how did your mental health journey begin and why is it important to you now?
So for me, my mental health journey began, I guess, 2 years ago. Around 2 years ago, but not like really when 2020 happened. I think I it really like boosted up like when 2020 happened, like being at home and not really working, and it's just I already like done like meditation and all that stuff, but I like doing the practice like strictly or like every day than I usually do now. So that's kind of like the start of my mental health journey into like mindfulness.
I thought that was a great answer, Kate.
Thank you.
Yeah, my mental health journey began around like 2018. Um, yeah, I was a mess before then. Like I was doing a lot of like really trashy stuff, I would have to say. But I think it took me to getting to the bottom to figuring out how to get back to where I am right now, Um, and I think it's important to me because I never thought it was important to me before that time. And yeah, I think it becomes really instilled in like Filipino culture to just not think that like mental health is important. And that's
Mhm.
just something fed to you, or at least to me, like ever since I was born. So just realizing that made it so that I took it a little more important. But yeah.
Somewhat of a similar story to Louis. It's weird. It's a weird dynamic of a question because for me, I would say that I definitely knew that there's something different about me from a very young age. I intersect a lot of very interesting identities as a member of the LGBTQ plus community. I was also Catholic, and I am also an immigrant, and I'm an Asian American, Phil-Am American, in a predominantly white part of Chicago. So I always knew having all those identities at once was also very interesting growing up. But I would say that my mental health journey I didn't acknowledge my mental health journey until I would say 2016 as a junior in high school, where just a lot of personal moments in my life started happening. As the passing of my Lolo, I just ended my first relationship. And then I was also just getting very stressed out academically at school because there were a lot of expectations on me. And 2016 was a very rough year for me. But ever since then, I think I took the initiative to kind of figure out what was going on and the issues that I've always dealt with my whole life, to where I can confidently say now that I have I have a great grasp on my mental health now. But that's only because that was a lot of like work I've had to do on my own. And I think that's what's interesting when you try and relate it to Filipino culture, is that with mental health, it can be a very isolating journey. In Filipino culture, it's not something that's commonly talked about. It's not something that's put out into the collective. And so, I do credit like my parents and my friends helping me along the way, but I credit myself for really taking that initiative and doing a lot of what I needed to do to help myself a lot. Which, when I reflect on it, I don't think that should be the case, because I think that your community and your family should always be supporting you. But it's very interesting trying to navigate that, especially as Filipino Americans, like all of us are here. So
Yeah, this is a pretty big question for me because after to Gabe, I think my journey started around like sophomore junior year of high school, and it was because like it was a pretty big like dark time in my life because I just felt like everything was going wrong. Like I had lost a lot of my friends due to like some like random like drama. It was like really weird. It was just I felt alone a lot of the time, and yeah, so I knew that my mental health was kind of just going down the drain. And it was also like junior year, I started becoming part of this like really rigorous like academic program. I don't know if I should like say what program it is, but basically like the program was just super like hard on you, and there's just so many expectations that you have to do so you could like get the like diploma, which I got the IB diploma, so that's pretty successful of me. But yeah, at this time, like I was pretty aware that I wasn't doing well, and not gonna lie, I didn't really know how to like cope with it. Like I didn't know if I should go to like a therapist or something or whatever. But it really helped that my friends were there for me to like always talk to. They're always there to like support me and give me like words of encouragement and like advice. It really meant a lot to me. But then yeah, senior year came, and of course like the college apps coming up, I was like, I kind of want to focus on like mental health for like a career path or something. So I was like, I'll major in psychology. And it really helps knowing the science behind like why I do these things and like why people think like this. So yeah, that's me now.
For sharing, and I think that's valid for every one of your journeys. And I know that this topic is one of intense because like it's a topic that we are still it's kind of new to our community, and I'm really glad to have you three be a part of this conversation, especially because in the corners of our lives there's a reason why we are here for this conversation. And I kind of wanted, and I know you shared a little bit about like where you were in the stages of your life, but in that aspect of our Filipino culture and identity, how do you understand your own culture and identity?
I don't. That's my answer. I don't. And that's also another interesting question, because I think being a Filipino American, you never really know how to interpret yourself or your identity at all. Maybe specific to me, but maybe applicable to you guys. I grew up in the Midwest is very white. The Midwest is really, really white. And I just so happened to grow up in a very white portion of Chicago. And that is very isolating in itself, because I was never really comfortable in my own skin. compared to maybe other people who lived in very dense Filipino American community centers like New York, New Jersey, or California. So when I talk to people from those regions, I always find it so interesting and how they always had church groups and youth groups to go to growing up, how they even had their own like summer camps or something. And for me, I had none of that. None of those resources were at my disposal at all. So again, it's tentative. You never really get to understand your identity, at least from where I live, because the Filipino American identity kind of doesn't exist in the Midwest yet. Like it really doesn't. And we just get grouped in with all a bunch of Asian Americans, and there's nothing wrong with that. But even Asian Americans are barely recognized in the Midwest too. When people think of Asian Americans or Filipino Americans, they think of the West Coast, which, to be fair, that is where most of the Asian Americans and Philams live. But it would be nice to get some recognition out here because we do some really amazing stuff out here. But I think on top of that, trying to understand your own culture for me as an immigrant, I came here in 2002 when I was 2 years old. So I love to say that I'm Filipino, but in reality, I am much more American than I am Filipino in terms of just the type of life that I've lived. When I go back to the Philippines, I can't understand the languages. I don't understand a lot of the dialects. You asked me what type of, I was talking about Kate with this. Like, I don't know that much Filipino food, really. I only started eating like a lot of Filipino food like 2 years ago, and I'm 20 years. Like, I had no knowledge of like my parents' hometowns or provinces at all, and I didn't even know my family history like that. And then I get displaced into another country where, they don't really focus on anyone unless you're white, especially in the region that I live in, and you never really get to find out who you are. I think I know the direction that I'm going in, but at this moment, I wouldn't say that I completely understand my culture and or identity.
Gabriel, I think you really brought up a really good point, and thank you for being so honest and being transparent to it, because I think, and like now I'm curious because as Kate is also part of the Midwest in Texas, do you also have similar feelings, and also being an immigrant as well?
For me, I don't, because for him, he grew up like, he was young when he moved over here. So, he still don't have like his own identity. But for me, I came here when I was like 20. So, I know for myself that I'm Filipino. Like it's deeply instilled in my roots, like I speak the language, and like in my family, everyone I know is there. So like I don't think I'm American. For me, I'm just Filipino. And yeah, I guess that's how it's like different. Like even though I'm in Texas, where it's like, even though Austin has a lot of different people from different places now, but even though I'm still in Texas, it's not as much on an effect to me, because I already know who I am. It's just that most of my friends are also Filipino that are like me, who just immigrated here like 3-4 years ago. So I feel like I'm not like getting other friends, maybe because I choose not to, maybe because I'm scared with like the language barrier. Like I'm scared like, maybe they're gonna judge me for the way I speak, or like maybe it's gonna be difficult for them to understand me, or like it might be difficult for me to express myself. So I might not be able to be friends with this other people, or like people who speak English. So, but yeah. I think, for me, I really think to myself that I'm Filipino and not really American, because also I'm not American, I'm Filipino. But yeah, it's already instilled in my roots and all that. So I'm really connected to my Filipino roots since immigrating here only like recently, like 4 or 5 years ago.
To be quite honest, I think like just to finish the discussion, like identity and culture, like my understanding of my own identity and culture, it changes from like second to second. Like it's never the same from one second to another because I'm always experiencing like new things and just being able to talk to like different people. And so I'm like getting all of this information about my culture. Like I'm always learning something new about myself. I'm always learning something new about being like a Filipino. And yeah, so like um I can go to my background to kind of just establish, but basically I'm from DC, Maryland, Virginia area, DMV area, and I grew up knowing a lot of titos and titas that my mom and dad were like friends with. Like my mom, she was a nurse and she was friends with all of the Filipino nurses that she was working with. And so I grew up um knowing and eating a lot of Filipino food. I grew up listening to karaoke and learning Tagalog by practicing like how to sing karaoke. And my mom, she got me like this little book, avocado, like a little avocado book, and I would have to be like ba be bo bu, and kind of just reading Tagalog. So I guess in a way similar to Kate, my parents have really tried to like root me in my like Filipino culture because they're like you're Filipino, you know, you gotta like learn this stuff. But I never actually like grasped the language until maybe like middle school, but I could barely like speak it to be honest. But I understood it well. I understood it well enough to like watch teleserie without like the like English subtitles and like listen to OPM on like my own time. So that was my understanding of Filipino culture, like when I was in middle school, you know, just watching teleserie and like listening to OPM. But of course, like that kind of changed when I went into college because I started learning things about like PCN, um learning like about Filipino American History Month. And I didn't know Filipino American History Month was a thing until I came to college. So yeah, that's just an example of I'm always learning new things as I progress and just like meeting new people. And it's kind of amazing. And yeah, similar to like my identity, like I never really know who I am as a Filipino. And I feel like your identity should be like dynamic, you know, you shouldn't be the same person that you were like 4 years ago. You know, you should always be like changing and being get bettering yourself and everything. And yeah, that's my opinion.
So I've been sitting back here listening to all of you guys speak, and I just want to like first and foremost give you guys so much appreciation. We all come from different backgrounds and we're all like in different parts of the US. I literally, okay, so I don't know geography. I literally pulled up Google Maps just to look at where everyone is. And we're literally in 4 different points of, or like 5 different points, including Chachi, of like America. I'm in SoCal. Ari's in Washington, D.C. Gabe's in Chicago, Illinois, and Kate's in Austin, Texas, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
so like the South, a little bit of like kind of North Midwest, and then East Coast, West Coast, and Hawaii. You know, this is like pretty beautiful that we're all in different places and connecting in this one space. And I just want to appreciate all you guys for sharing all of that because it just made me think about all of my experiences as well. Um, I mean, I'm an immigrant from the Philippines. I was born in Manila, came here when I was in second grade. Um, and life is not easy being an immigrant. Life is not easy in America looking the way I do, looking the way we do, especially um, being away from family, being away from loved ones. Filipino culture to me was anything I could piece together. really like anything I could piece together within like my community, within my friends growing up. Um, things that I could remember that I take from my family back home in the Philippines, and things I can like make up while I'm here. Um, I definitely resonate with everything that you said. As soon as you said you don't understand your Filipino culture and identity, that hit me. I was like, I don't either. And I feel like a part of me growing up um felt like I always had to prove self or to everyone or to someone that I'm Filipino enough because I was born in the Philippines. I'm slowly kind of losing my language and understanding Tagalog, and I've been noticing that, and it's kind of been a huge insecurity for me because it's like if I don't know Tagalog, then what am I? Just like an American at this point. But I think something I've been called to share right now is the fact that I saw this thing on Instagram. It's just another post, but it basically says for me being an authentic Filipino isn't about how much Filipino culture I know. It's me living my life. You don't have to measure this idea of how Filipino you are based on certain traits. If you're Filipino, whatever you do is inherently Filipino in its own way. And I think that's beautiful. We're all coming from the same ancestors, and I don't know, and we're here today representing that.
It's funny how like you said like you don't want like to lose like the language. Well, for me, I'm trying so hard not to like like to speak English very well, and deep inside like I wish I don't have like my accent so I can be like like everyone else or something like that. But it's just so amazing how different things are. Like how you want to keep like the Filipino language. And like for me, I'm so much trying to fit in. Like sometimes I thought, oh, that's like, oh, let me say that again because like the way I speak is not right. Because in my mind that shouldn't. That's not the way to speak it or something like that. Because with my accent.
You speak English beautifully. We can all
Oh,
understand you very
oh,
clearly.
thank you.
And I just want to say, I think that's what makes living in America so beautiful is that there's a celebration of where we all come from too. So be proud of your accent. Like
Thank you.
honestly, like truly, like I really do wish sometimes that when I attempt to speak, I have my accent come out, but there's no accent. And I guess that kind of roots back to like, is that authentic? Which is what I want on Louis' quote on the quote, because I think everyone when they say that you're Filipino, like what are the first things that come to your head? First thing that comes to your head are a bunch of stereotypes, right? It's like, oh, they love adobo. They're very hospitable people. It's like hot in the Philippines, right? Like just a lot of stereotypes that come out. And then even the negative stereotypes too. It's like, oh, Filipinos, they just love to talk about each other,
Yeah.
or they're very selfish, that they have a crab mentality.
That colonial mentality.
The crab mentality is a byproduct of the colonial mentality. And it's like this whole thing where it's like, I love the quote that you brought up because just being yourself makes you Filipino enough, like whether or not you fit into the stereotypes or not. Because sometimes people ridicule me. They're like, Gabriel, like, how do you not eat this food? How do you not know what this thing is? Like, how come you can't understand this part? And I'm like, I just don't, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I still have the same skin color as you. I still have the same ancestors as you. I'm still Filipino enough in my own eyes, and that I don't need you to say that all those comments about me suddenly makes me illegitimate, because we're all legitimate in being Filipino ourselves. And I think that is very important. People need to realize, and this whole thing about like Filipinos versus like Filipino Americans, it should not exist. Like it shouldn't exist in my opinion, because like we're all one. We just happen to live in different parts of the world. Some of us are part of the diaspora, and that's fine. But we all have our own unique experiences that we could bring together that can help each other And I would rather use those experiences that everyone has as Filipinos, whether you're from the Philippines or whether you live in America or in another part of the world, that you can take those experiences and work together to create solutions for each other instead of using that just the fact that you may have different experiences as a divider. That was a rant. Don't know where I was going with that, but everyone here is legitimate, and I love your accent. Okay.
What you all said was said. I think, Gabriel, you really pieced it well together, especially with what you said. How with all of our different experiences, if we, as a diaspora and from people from the homeland, if we're able to see that there there's no such thing as just what it means to be Filipino, but what it means to help each other as a Filipino from this different areas of the world, and how can we piece it together to make that who we are. And like, just to segue into like the next question, which we'll kind of like go into, is what values did you grow up with your family that has helped shape your understanding of what mental health and what self-care is to you?
My values I grew up with are Catholic. Just like a lot of Filipinos. I know the country is majority Catholic. And I think, and I have gone into this in like epic discussions before. For those watching, epic is the internship that I met Louie, Ari, and Chachi through. We've talked about this quite a bit. With most Filipinos being Roman Catholic, I guess they can understand what I'm going to talk about. I went to a Catholic elementary. So I would like to say that Catholic values are kindness, honesty, forgiveness, and those were the values that I grew up with. I think what made it interesting is that I didn't necessarily agree with the institution of the church itself, but I believed in the values that they had. A lot of the world, unfortunately, doesn't follow Catholic values in the sense of like, I think that it is good to be kind and forgiving, to be humble, to be honest and appreciate others for everything that they are. And I think when I realized in the world that, not everything is like that. When I stepped out of my bubble of my Catholic school and I entered the real world and I realized that people are mean, people are rude, like the world is not pretty by any means or any capacity at all. It was a shocker to me. And I think it did take part of a toll on my mental health because I was like, okay, this perfect little world that was constructed to me throughout my entire life, from what the church told me, that's not what it actually is, And to have that realization hit and to try and apply those values that I grew up with in a society that doesn't necessarily value those type of beliefs is very interesting. And it's a lot of self-reflection that you have to do. So I think beyond like the Catholic values that I grew up with, the values of work is something that I want to talk about. The work ethic that Filipinos have is like on a different level. It really is. With a majority of the country being in extreme poverty, I'm always so proud and happy to hear the success stories that come out of the Philippines, And especially I am very privileged and lucky that my family is one of those success stories. My parents, all the older members of my family grew up in extreme disparate poverty back in the Philippines. Like when World War II came around, when my grandparents were alive, it wiped out everything, like any type of wealth accumulation, any type of businesses that they had. And my family had to start from scratch, basically. Starting from scratch meant starting from poverty. And it was only through my grandparents' work ethic where my grandma and grandpa would wake up 4 a.m. in the morning to work in the fields. And then when they moved to Manila, they would man a food stand and my grandpa would work in the factories and they would get chased by the police for selling fruit illegally, And for my 2 grandparents to send all 6 of their children to the top 5 universities of the Philippines, to get amazing professional degrees to get them to this country where I can sit here in my own room with running electricity and plumbing, like paved roads on the street, like with a college education as is right now. Like I am so lucky compared to so many that don't have those opportunities back home, which is why I study to what I do to allow people back home to get the same opportunities as I have, And That's another part of my mental health journey. It's like being an immigrant and for my family to come here for the sole reason of coming here to give me and my siblings a better life. That was so much stress to undertake. I feel like that's something that a lot of immigrant children, just in general, can't talk about in fear of disappointing their families, because we do have our own mental health problems. We do have our own issues here, but we can't feel like we can't talk about them because it's like, why can we complain when I don't have to wake up at 4 a.m. to work in the fields to make $2 a day and feed 6 children. Like I complain when my Wi-Fi goes out for 2 seconds and I'm like, oh my God, like my YouTube video, my Netflix is not loading right now, or how the water takes like 2 minutes longer to get hot for my like 30-minute shower that I take every day. Like it seems like a very privileged place to be like, why would I have mental health issues? Would I why should I care about self-care? Like I need to work hard to make their sacrifice worth it. But when I grew up and I went through that stress and those struggles, I was like, I need to take care of myself too, or no one's going to win at the end of the day. Not that this is a competition or a race, but it's like, I'm not going to be good. And when I don't feel good, I'm not going to be able to maybe live up to not only their expectations, but my own expectations and my own goals that I have. So like I said, it's like all these intersecting beliefs and value systems of being Catholic, of being an immigrant, of that work ethic that I needed to take up, they all took a really big toll on me. And it was only through like me trying to work through things that I kind of got through it. But to this day, again, it's like that question with identity. I don't understand my identity as much as I don't have an amazing grasp of my mental health still. And like how the values that I grew up with make sense with what I want to do or what I need to do.
Thank you for sharing all of that, Gabe. That was really resonate. I grew up with Catholic values too. At some point, I decided to try Christianity. I like dipped my pool in like organized religion, hopping around just because I was curious. And I guess my relationship with organized religion quite complicated. I think the most intact value I have growing up was my value in community. I think community like meant the most to me and shaped me in ways I never thought I could be shaped. And I think the only reason I do prioritize mental health and I do prioritize self-care is because of the community I built myself, and not so much the community I grew up with. Growing up in the Philippines, yeah, you are in community, um, but it's I really don't know how to word this. It's not really. It was kind of more of like a community serving each other, if that makes sense. My mom would do things to like make sure I, have food on my plate. My grandma would take care of me while she's at work. It was basically that kind of community. And I guess when I came to America and when my friends and the community I built myself started taking like self-care seriously, started taking mental health seriously, we kind of started using that to build each other up instead of just like using service and acts of service as a way to show that we love each other. Does that make sense? I don't know. I'm kind of just trying to understand and like break things down in my head as I go. But yeah, like I think the only reason I do prioritize mental health is because I'm lucky enough to have friends who did that for me first and who paved the road for me and who like lifted me up in that way. Because my family does not, and they also don't really do self-care because like what Gabe said, Filipino work ethic is out of this world and it's not sustainable. It's really not sustainable. And yeah, I think I just got lucky. I to be at the place I'm at because of the friends I have.
Yeah, so like with what both of you guys have said, I kind of like relate, especially to Gabe again. It's like weird how I can relate to him with like, growing up Catholic and what else did he say? But like growing up Catholic and following all the values and like, like having all the pressure to do good, to be your best, since like, all like your like parents and your grandparents work hard for you to be where you are right now. And that's kind of like me, but like with a Filipino setting, like my parents, they work really hard to be to to where I am right now. And like I feel like, like here them being in the Philippines and me being here in the US, like, like sometimes like it feels like, selfish to have like, like prioritize your mental health and all that, since like, you have like everything, like you have more access to like warm water, or like it's easier to get what the like the basic things here in the US than like back home in the Philippines. So that's kind of like that. But I also understand like, the community having like a like sense of community is like one of the things that like has shaped like I guess like my mental health journey. But like as we talked about, like how Philippines, it's not really a thing in the Philippines, like like having self-care day, mental health day, because of like the Filipino work ethic, or like being back home in the Philippines. And I grew up like talking about mental health is not really a thing or something you can just get over with. So there's like all these values of kindness and all that, but also like really mental health wasn't really a topic for us, since like instead of prioritizing, I guess, mental health, so like my family or grandparents, like first they have to prioritize like food first, like what are we gonna eat for lunch. So that's how like it's like pushed back in the like the back of you know instead of also like giving acknowledging it, like it's something you also need. So those are like the kind of things. But like since now that I'm here in the US, like like I thought like, okay, since I recently learned about this and how like it's really like helped me, and I think it's really helping me to be the better version of myself. So I'd like to for me, I would like to share it with everyone. And I thought having my Instagram account, or like just sharing it to social media, to my friends and my family, how like it's really important to like prioritize your mental health and set boundaries, and just like pause and take breaks is also as important as other things. So yeah, that was it for me. That is it.
I honestly just want to start by like thanking all three of you for like sharing your stories, because like I definitely like resonated with like a lot of it. Um, but however, I am kind of like different because so I'm Catholic, so that's obvious. I go to a Catholic university. Like I literally go to a Catholic university. But growing up, it didn't. It wasn't really like a typical Catholic upbringing, because I actually didn't go to mass like every Sunday. It was the kind of thing where like we only really went to mass when it was like Christmas or like Easter mass, and I've never really questioned why, but it didn't really like change the person that I came out to be, because my mom, like, she always instilled those like same values of like kindness and like, just compassion, like honesty and like forgiveness. And I still like value all of those very deeply, even without like this like really strict Catholic upbringing. And so it's really like super interesting to hear all of this. But my mom was definitely like a super big like catalyst in um why I understand like my mental health and like self-care, because like um she understands, like I'm very lucky to have a parent that like really um understands the importance of taking care of like mental health, because she's seen it in her own mother, who passed away when she was 12 because she suffered from depression. um I don't know if, okay, sorry if this is like a trigger warning, but like basically my mom's mom, my Lola, um, she like she committed suicide when my mom was 12. So from a very early age, my mom has known about like mental illness, and she understands the importance of like taking care of yourself. And from like starting high school, when I was kind of starting to like have like I was starting to like feel really down, um, we would have like very deep talks about how I was feeling. And she was like, you know, you can't bottle all of these feelings to yourself. You have to like say it, because you know, like I understand what you're going through. I saw my mom go through that too. Like she would tell me this. And yeah, because of that, I started caring about my mental health like a lot more because of her. And so I just learned how to like be kinder to myself, you know, be kind to others, because you know, you don't know what they might be going through. Like they might be having a bad day, and you just have to be like kind to others, and just forgive yourself of what decisions that you may have made in the past, because
Aryelle, for sharing. I know it's not easy to share that, and like thank you for just being open with us and sharing part of your story with us. And I feel like as we kind of like wrap the entire conversation, because it's getting late and where you guys are all at. One thing that I took away from the conversation that we had is this importance of staying connected and staying connected with our family. And then that's really a big thing in our Filipino culture. It's like family is always important to us, and no matter like what happens, like whether friends like are gone, family is always number one for us. And one thing that I wanted to kind of ask before we kind of like go our separate ways is, what is one thing that you can take away from this conversation?
Took away from this conversation is the importance of connection. Uh, Connection with our ancestors, connection to each other. Um, yeah, I felt like that's great. Thank you, Chachi, for bringing us together.
My takeaway was like, like even though like, me, I'm like as like different with like most of you guys, like, like some of you guys came here when you were here, or like some of you guys are born here, but like all of us like has like we have like the same middle ground, like we have things that we can relate from each other, and we're not really so different from each other at all, and like Filipino American or Filipino or whatever you call your name, but it was like at the end of the day, we're all just Filipinos.
Took away is that, sometimes I'm always astounded at the very unique experiences and stories that a lot of people have. Um, like I said, it can be very isolating where I live, being Filipino American or just Filipino in general. And it's always just fascinating to hear other people's stories. So I guess similar to what you guys have said, not only is it like connection, but building relationships with other people and understanding their stories together. Because there are so many commonalities between everyone, and that I think in the current climate, political climate, social climate that we live in, I think we focus a lot on the differences between each other. But at the end of the day, I think everyone just wants to be happy. Everyone wants to be stable. Everyone wants to be successful in whatever capacity they think that is. And I think tonight has shown me that although we all may be very different, there are a lot of similarities and a lot of similar goals that we all have with each other. And I think that's something that's very valuable and precious to know and understand.
Yeah, like similar to what all of you have been saying, like I think my biggest takeaway is like storytelling is just powerful, you know, it helps like build these bridges between each other that like we thought were just long lonesome like islands, but now we're literally building bridges to like get to know one another, get to know each other's like journeys and everything. And you know, like like everyone said, like we're not as different as we think we are, even if we're from like different parts of the world and have been born and raised in like different kind of like settings. And I think just being able to connect with other people, that it's powerful. So hopefully all of us can connect with other people in some kind of way, like no matter.